The Caribbean sun glimmered upon the turquoise waters, casting ripples of light across the old stone walls of San Juan. Along the coast, where the waves kissed the sand, a young man stood still, as if listening to the sea itself. His name was Mateo Rivera, a son of Puerto Rico, born with the ocean in his veins and the heartbeat of the island in his chest. Mateo's family had lived on this land for generations. Their modest house overlooked the bay, a place filled with memories of laughter, hardship, and countless stories told by his grandfather beneath the mango tree. But that morning, Mateo's gaze was heavy, for rumors whispered through the town like the evening breeze. An investor from overseas had arrived, eyes set on the land, and with him came the threat of change. Isabella Cruz, his childhood companion, approached with a basket of guavas in her hands. Her hair danced with the wind, and her smile carried a warmth that even worry could not dim. "You have heard it too, haven't you?" she said softly, placing the basket on the stone wall. "They want to take the Rivera land." Mateo nodded, though silence hung between them. The land was more than soil and stone. It was the spirit of his ancestors, the rhythm of his people, the very pulse of who he was. To lose it would mean losing a part of himself. As the tide rose and the shadows stretched across the shore, Mateo felt the weight of a choice forming within him. He did not yet know how, but something stirred deep inside. A journey had begun, though its path remained hidden in the waves. The heart of old San Juan pulsed with life. Cobbled streets carried the sound of merchants calling, children laughing, and musicians strumming their guitars beneath balconies draped with bougainvillea. Yet, amid the colors and rhythms of the plaza, unease lingered in the air like a shadow behind the sun. Mateo walked alongside Isabella, weaving through the crowd. The church bells rang noon as they approached the gathering near the fountain. Townsfolk were whispering, their voices hushed but urgent. An older fisherman named Don Rafael leaned on his cane, shaking his head. "They say the man from the north will build hotels on the shore," he murmured, eyes clouded with worry. "No place for our boats, no land for our children." The name of the investor traveled quickly. Richard Halden, a wealthy developer from abroad, had arrived the night before. With sharp suits and sharper words, he spoke of progress, of opportunity, but the glimmer in his eyes betrayed another truth. Isabella's hand brushed against Mateo's arm. "He will not stop, Mateo. He sees only money where we see home." Mateo felt his jaw tighten. He thought of his late father's voice, teaching him how to cast nets in the bay. He thought of his grandmother's songs sung in the evenings, rooted in soil and sea. The thought of losing all that made his chest burn. From the corner of the plaza, a carriage door opened. Richard Halden stepped out, his polished shoes clicking against the stones. His presence silenced the crowd. He scanned the faces before him with a smile that was thin and calculated. "Our friends of Puerto Rico," Halden began, his accent foreign and commanding. "Together we will bring prosperity to these shores." Mateo's fists curled at his sides. Prosperity for whom? The question rang louder than the bells above, and as Halden's words washed over the plaza, Mateo knew he could not remain silent for long. Night fell over San Juan with a veil of silver moonlight. The streets that once hummed with chatter now lay hushed, save for the distant rhythm of drums carried from a nearby tavern. Mateo sat alone beneath the mango tree in his family's courtyard, the same place where his grandfather once told stories of the island's spirit. The air was thick with memory. He could almost hear his grandfather's voice again. "This land is not ours to sell, Mateo. We belong to it. The roots of our people are deeper than any coin can reach." Mateo closed his eyes and touched the soil with his fingers. It was warm, alive, a silent reminder of every generation that had walked before him. Yet doubt crept in like a shadow. Richard Halden was powerful, and the community seemed torn between resistance and the promises of wealth. A soft voice broke the silence. "You are thinking of him again," Isabella whispered, stepping into the courtyard with a lantern in her hand. The golden light flickered across her face. Mateo exhaled slowly. "How can I fight someone who owns everything but the sea?" Isabella placed the lantern down and knelt beside him. You do not fight him alone. The land listens, Mateo. So, do the people. They only need a voice. Her words lingered in the night, sparking something inside him. Perhaps the strength he sought was not in money, nor in weapons, but in the unity of those who still remembered what Puerto Rico truly was. Above them, the wind stirred the leaves of the mango tree, carrying the scent of earth and salt. It felt as though the ancestors themselves were listening, waiting for Mateo to choose. The morning sun painted the harbor in shades of gold. Fishermen hauled their nets, children played by the shore, and gulls cried above the waves. Yet the rhythm of the day was broken when a stranger appeared at Mateo's doorstep. He was tall, with dark hair swept neatly back, and his suit looked too fine for the dusty streets of San Juan. He introduced himself as Victor Delgado, a lawyer who claimed to represent Richard Halden. His voice was smooth, his manner polite, yet every word carried a weight that pressed upon the heart. "Señor Rivera," Victor said, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt, "my employer admires your land. He wishes to offer you more than it's worth. Enough for you and your family to live in comfort far from here." Mateo stared at him in silence. The mango tree swayed above, its branches whispering like restless spirits. Finally he spoke. "This land is not for sale." Victor smiled faintly, as though he expected such an answer. "Think carefully, senor. Opportunities like this do not return. Halden does not like to be refused." Isabella appeared from the doorway, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Then he should learn that Puerto Ricans are not bought with gold." The lawyer gave a slight bow and turned away, his polished shoes crunching against the gravel. But before leaving, he paused and glanced back. "Every tide can be changed, Señor Rivera. Some by the moon, some by men." As he disappeared down the road, a chill ran through Mateo. The offer had not been a courtesy. It was a warning, and beneath it lay a promise of storms yet to come. The sky darkened long before the storm arrived. Heavy clouds rolled over the horizon, swallowing the sun and casting a restless shadow across San Juan. The fishermen pulled their boats ashore, their voices tense as thunder rumbled over the water. Mateo stood at the edge of the bay, his shirt clinging to his skin as the first drops of rain fell. The wind howled, carrying with it the scent of salt and danger. By his side, Isabella wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Storms are never just storms," she murmured. "They remind us how small we are." As the sea grew violent, Mateo's thoughts returned to Victor Delgado's warning. Halden was not a man who waited patiently. He would strike like the storm itself, sudden and merciless. The land was more than property to him. It was conquest. The first wave crashed against the rocks, sending spray high into the air. Mateo closed his eyes, remembering the voices of his ancestors, the lessons of his father, the songs of his grandmother. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within him. Could he protect his home against a power so great, or would the tide sweep everything away? The rain fell harder, drumming against the earth. Isabella reached for his hand, her grip firm and unyielding. "You are not alone, Mateo. Whatever comes, we face it together." In that moment, lightning split the sky, illuminating the restless sea. The storm raged, but within it, a fire ignited in Mateo's chest. He would not surrender. The storm was a test, and he was ready to endure it. When the storm had passed, San Juan awoke to streets washed clean yet heavy with unease. News spread quickly that Richard Halden's men had begun surveying the coast, marking boundaries with wooden stakes as if the land already belonged to him. That evening, Mateo and Isabella climbed the narrow path to the old lighthouse that overlooked the bay. Its beacon, though weathered by years, still cast its guiding light across the dark sea. One by one, villagers arrived. Fishermen with calloused hands, farmers smelling of soil, mothers carrying lanterns, and elders leaning on canes. They had come because they knew the time to remain silent had ended. Don Rafael, the old fisherman, cleared his throat. "If Halden takes the shore, we lose not only our homes but our way of life. No boat, no harvest, no future. We must decide." The crowd murmured, some fearful, others angry. Isabella's voice rose above them, strong and clear. We are not powerless. This land breathes with our ancestors. If we stand together, he cannot tear us apart. Mateo felt every eye turn to him. His chest tightened, for he had never seen himself as a leader. Yet the weight of their hope pressed upon him, and he knew he could not step back. He lifted his voice, so all could hear. We will protect what is ours, he declared. Not with violence, but with unity. Every stone, every tree, every wave belongs to Puerto Rico. Let Halden see that he faces not one man, but an island. The lighthouse lantern glowed behind him, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch across the sea. For the first time, Mateo sensed the power of a community awakened. The fight was no longer his alone. Days passed, and the tension in San Juan thickened like smoke before a fire. Halden's men moved swiftly, mapping the shoreline, driving stakes into the sand, and drawing lines on paper that ignored the lives built upon that soil. Some villagers turned their faces away, unwilling to challenge the stranger's wealth. Others whispered of the money offered in secret, enough to tempt even the proudest heart. Mateo walked through the market square, watching familiar faces shift uncomfortably as he passed. He saw a farmer clutching a bag of coins, eyes lowered in shame. He saw a shopkeeper shaking hands with Victor Delgado. Betrayal carried no sound, yet it echoed louder than thunder. That night, under the glow of oil lamps, Mateo confronted the villagers at the plaza. Do you not see what he is doing? Halden divides us, so that we forget our strength. Every coin you take is a chain around the island's neck. An elderly woman, her voice trembling, answered. But we are tired, Mateo. Tired of fighting storms, tired of hunger. What if he truly brings change? Isabella stepped forward, her gaze fierce. Change that silences our songs, buries our roots, and leaves our children strangers in their own land? That is no future. That is exile. The plaza grew silent. Mateo's heart ached as he looked upon his people. He understood their fear, but fear was a seed that Halden watered with promises. The price of silence, Mateo realized, was not gold, but the soul of Puerto Rico itself. From the shadows, Victor Delgado watched, his eyes sharp and calculating. He knew the cracks in the community had begun to widen, and he intended to break them open. The night air was heavy with heat, thick with the scent of salt and smoke from distant cooking fires. San Juan seemed to hold its breath as Mateo lay restless beneath the old roof of his family home. The silence shattered when a sharp knock echoed at the door. Isabella rushed in, her face pale in the lantern light. Mateo, the boats. They are burning. He ran to the shore, his heart pounding. Flames devoured the fishermen's vessels, their wooden frames crackling as sparks flew into the black sky. Villagers gathered in horror, their voices rising in panic as the fire spread from boat to boat. The sea, once their ally, now reflected an inferno. Don Rafael fell to his knees, tears streaming down his weathered face. Those boats were our lives, he cried, his voice breaking. Mateo's fists trembled. This was no accident. The fire bore the mark of warning, the kind spoken not in words but in destruction. Halden's message was clear. Resistance would be met with ruin. Victor Delgado stood at the edge of the crowd, his expression unreadable, his silhouette lit by the burning boats. When Mateo stepped toward him, Victor simply said, "Halden builds with one hand, and with the other he clears what stands in his way. Remember that, Señor Rivera." The flames hissed as the tide rose to swallow the wreckage, but the damage had been done. Livelihoods lay in ashes, and fear coursed through the people like poison. Yet in the glow of the embers, Mateo's resolve hardened. The fire had not broken them. It had revealed the cost of surrender. And he swore, with the sea as his witness, that Puerto Rico's spirit would not be consumed so easily. The days after the fire were heavy with sorrow. Without their boats, the fishermen could not cast their nets, and hunger crept silently into San Juan. Some villagers whispered of leaving, others of surrendering to Halden's offers. Yet amidst the despair, Mateo and Isabella refused to let the spirit of their people wither. They journeyed inland, through green hills and forests alive with the songs of coqui frogs. There, far from the reach of Halden's men, they visited the elders who carried the oldest stories of Puerto Rico. Around a fire of palm leaves, the voices of the ancients rose, reminding them that the island was more than earth and sea. It was memory, blood, and heartbeat. An elder named Dona Marisol placed her weathered hand upon Mateo's shoulder. The strength you seek is not in stone or in gold. It is in the bond of your people. When one voice speaks, it may be silenced. When all voices rise, the island itself will roar. Mateo bowed his head, her words sinking deep. He saw now that resistance was not about one man against Halden's empire. It was about awakening the heart of Puerto Rico, about reminding every soul that they belonged to something greater than fear. When he and Isabella returned to San Juan, they carried with them not despair but a plan. The lighthouse would shine again, not only as a beacon for ships, but as a call for unity. The people would gather, not in whispers, but in song and defiance. As night settled over the coast, Mateo looked upon the restless waves. For the first time, he felt the island itself breathe with him, urging him forward. The final tide was coming, and he was ready to meet it. The lighthouse blazed against the night sky, its great lantern sweeping across the sea like a watchful eye. Word had spread through the villages, and people poured into San Juan carrying torches, drums, and banners painted with the colors of Puerto Rico. The plaza throbbed with the rhythm of voices joined together, no longer whispers, but a chorus of defiance. Mateo stood at the steps of the lighthouse, Isabella at his side. The crowd looked to him, their faces lit with firelight. His voice rang out, steady and strong. This land is not for sale. It belongs to those who live upon it, to those who honor its past, and to those who will protect its future. Tonight we rise, not as many, but as one. The echo of his words rolled over the waves, carried by the wind. At the edge of the plaza, Richard Halden appeared with his entourage, Victor Delgado by his side. Halden's smile faltered as he faced the sea of united voices. He had expected fear, but what stood before him was resolve forged from centuries. Drums pounded like thunder. Women raised their songs into the night. Men stood shoulder to shoulder, holding the line. Even the children's voices rang out, high and unbroken. The sound grew until it seemed the island itself was alive, roaring with its people. Halden raised his hand to speak, but the chants drowned him. His words were powerless against the tide of unity. Victor's gaze shifted uneasily, and for the first time, Mateo saw doubt flicker in the lawyer's eyes. The waves crashed against the rocks below, fierce and untamed. The crowd surged forward, not with violence, but with unshakable presence. Halden realized the truth. No chain of gold could bind an island whose heart refused to be silenced. Mateo lifted his torch high, its flame mirrored by hundreds of others. The night belonged to them. The land belonged to them. And as the sea thundered against the shore, Puerto Rico itself seemed to rise, eternal and unyielding, against the last tide.